The crown prince, whom my elder legitimate sister adored, lingered in the brothels. She even planned to disguise herself as a courtesan to win his favor. I was the one who forcibly stopped her. Later my elder sister married the third prince and eventually became empress. I rejoiced for her. On the day of the enthronement ceremony, however, she had me subjected to 1,000 cuts and tortured to death. Her face twisted with poisoned glee. This is your retribution. Waking again, back in my youth, when my sister and the brothel madam plotted to run away, I smiled and encouraged them. The crown prince, seeing sister's devotion, will surely be moved and spend his life with her. In this life, then, she got her wish, to be a noblewoman of the brothel. When I died, the corpse was almost a mass of shredded flesh, unbearably foul. Not even the crows would peck at it. That day was my elder sister Yunshu's enthronement ceremony. I happily put on my finest dress and entered the palace to congratulate her. I never could have imagined that on the day she became empress, Yunshu would tie me to an iron frame and slice through my flesh, skin, meridians, bones, organs, cutting me again and again so that I suffered unbearably yet did not bleed to death, remaining conscious to feel every second of pain. Why? I was already in so much pain I could not make a sound, staring at her with only my eyes in bewilderment. She was my most revered elder sister. Every time Yunshu walked by in cloud-patterned brocade and gold embroidery, her hair adorned with palace pearls and ornaments, moving with graceful poise, I looked up at her with a mixture of reverence and adoration. Why are you doing this to me? Yunshu's face twisted with poisoned malice. Yuning, this is your retribution. If it weren't for you, I would have already married the crown prince. The new emperor was not the crown prince but the third prince who had kept a low profile. The former crown prince behaved recklessly. He fancied himself a charming man of talent, spending his days lingering in brothels and pleasure houses, even once bringing 7 courtesans into his room in a single night. I never expected that Yunshu, who had become the most honored woman in the world, would still be infatuated with that fickle, philanderous crown prince. My throat had already been slit by Yunshu. I could only emit a hoarse low howl, horrifying to hear. Yunshu's face shifted slightly. What are you laughing at? I'm laughing at you. Yunshu, you really are beyond foolish. Yunshu severed my limbs and drove a knife into my heart. If there is an afterlife. My eyes widened, refusing to close in death. I will make sure to watch how Yunshu ruins her life. The pear fragrance rises in curling wisps. I lay on the imperial couch, half dazed, and heard a conversation between a woman and a young maiden coming from outside. Mother Hong, is what you said true? The woman's voice was obsequious. Miss, you grace our red sleeves house with your presence. The servants return to the household, who would dare to insult you? The girl's voice hesitated slightly. Then, will people in the capital know? Certainly not. Madame Hong said decisively. Our Hongxiu house has a tradition. The top courtesan keeps her face covered. Only the room's guest may see her face. Besides, aren't you doing this for the crown prince? Madame Hong chuckled. When the time comes I'll bring you into the crown prince's chamber. The crown prince will surely be captivated by your beauty, talent, and gentle charms. Then the matter will be settled. I suddenly woke with a start, cold sweat soaking my clothes. In my previous life, I was resting in the inner room when Yunshu and the madam, thinking the room empty, plotted to run away. I rushed out of the inner room to plead in vain and had no choice but to tell my father, who intercepted Yunshu. My father, furious, intended to whip Yunshu to death. My Yun family had produced generals, great ministers, and even an empress, but never a prostitute. I took a few lashes in place of Yunshu, clinging tightly to my father's leg and begging, Father, sister is frail. A noble lady must not be whipped. She already knows she was wrong. Could you punish her by having her copy Buddhist scriptures to calm her mind instead? At the time I only wanted to protect Yunshu, and I didn't notice the resentful look she shot me. Yunshu was my father's treasured daughter. She had maids to copy the sutras for her, was only confined for half a month, and the matter was quietly forgiven as a small punishment serving as a warning. I, however, was whipped until my skin was torn and didn't heal for over half a year. Looking back now, How could my father have wanted Yunshu to suffer? I clearly had stopped him. Those last few lashes were plainly vented at me. A shadow passed and Yunshu's voice suddenly rang from the outer room. Who's in there? Come out. I lifted the canopy aside and walked out with composure. It's me. Yunshu's cheeks went pale. Yuning, what are you doing here? I smiled. I just woke up and heard sister talking with this mother. Yunshu's lips moved. Will you tell father? Of course not, I said in the most sincere tone. What's wrong with going into a brothel to play a courtesan? If the crown prince sees you so devoted, he'll surely be deeply moved and you two will grow old together. Yunshu was astonished. You would actually support me? I smiled. Isn't that how the scripts usually go? A young lady and a noble young master hide their identities, meet by chance, and in the end marry, living happily ever after. Not only that, I'm going to pour more fuel on her fire. Sister, the crown prince has seen countless people. If you want to win his favor, you need some skills of your own. For so many years, Madame Hong has run the Red Sleeve House. She surely has secret techniques for training girls. Why don't you learn from Madame Hong? When you're at the crown prince's side, you'll be able to enchant him utterly. Yunshu suddenly understood and turned to Madame Hong. Madame Hong, use your methods for training girls to teach me. Ah. Madame Hong smiled obsequiously. This old servant will certainly spare no effort and teach you everything I have. I lowered my eyes to hide the amusement in them. On the stage, the young hero and the leading lady sing, jest, and act, powdered and painted. They step into the spotlight to thunderous applause. But every line they speak, every move they make, is performed according to the script. When the script tells them to cry, they cry. When it tells them to laugh, they laugh. In my past life, every wound Yunshu carved into me is unforgettable. To kill her with a single stroke would make her death too swift. So I wrote a play for Yunshu as well. Letting her taste bliss and then fall into the abyss, wouldn't that be far more interesting? I prefer plotting and scheming to a quick death. Like a moth drawn to a spider web, it is wound tight by silken threads inch by inch until nothing remains but bones. Yunshu thinks she is fated for greatness, not realizing that this great show has only just begun. The next day, I summoned the maid Mo Hua and handed her 20 taels of silver. I've heard your mother fell seriously ill. This money is for her treatment. If it isn't enough, come to me again. Mo Hua is Yunshu's personal maid. When going to the theater to watch a show, she always has to buy a good seat, so that she can clearly see the actors' performances down to the finest detail. Doesn't she? Mo Hua knelt on the ground and knocked her head with a thudding sound. Thank you, Miss Tu. Thank you, Miss Tu. I helped her up. There's no need for that. I was only acting on impulse as well. Mo Hua choked back tears. I will go beg the eldest lady. Yet the eldest lady scolds me for my lowly body. Dying is no great loss. Having been reborn, I have come to understand Yunshu a bit more. Yunshu each month distributes porridge to the commoners, which high officials and nobles in the capital wouldn't praise with a line like, Miss Yun's compassionate heart. Yet she pays no heed to the cries right beside her. In the previous life, she once pushed me into a pool in winter, causing me to fall gravely ill for half a year. She also casually spoke at the noble lady's flower viewing banquet that, my mother is only a foot washing maid, allowing others to mock and sneer at me, and I always believed her words. Sincerely treating her as my good elder sister, I shook my head and said to Mo Hua, what distinction is there between a noble young miss and a common maid? And birth is only the starting point of life. Every next step will determine which fork the future path leads to. A young lady may fall into the dust, and a maid could also become a dragon among men. More importantly, in life, how should one choose? Since Yunshu began to learn the methods of brothel girls, she has made me more useful, dumping all the chores on me. I sit in the inner hall, helping Yunshu write her classics and histories, her essays, and practice arithmetic with counting beads. Beyond a screen, Yunshu is learning the charms of the theater from the madam. Making spirit paper, Madame Hong placed several raw eggs on the bed, then put a thin soft pad over the eggs, and laid a stack of pure, delicate spirit paper on top of the pad. Sit on the spirit paper, twist the paper into the shape of a hand fan, and if the raw eggs beneath the pad remain intact, your skill is considered mastered. Madame Hong leaned close and whispered a few words. Yunshu heard and blushed all over. There, how should one use force there? Madame Hong chuckled. When the crown prince descends to our red sleeves house to choose a girl, there's only one requirement: she must be seductive. The eldest miss is still too proper. In a brothel, if a girl isn't flirtatious and alluring, how can she capture a man's heart? Yunshu practiced for over a month. From at first crushing a raw egg by sitting on it to mastering it so the egg neither broke nor scattered, and then arranging ghost money into the shape of a fan. Madame Hong was extremely pleased and plotted the next step with her. The first day of the 4th month is our Red Sleeves House's big day, called Red Sleeve Invitation. Tender young girls will all make their debut then, and the highest bidder can have the girl's first night. By then, when His Highness the Crown Prince sees the eldest Miss's unparalleled beauty, he will surely be dazzled. Yunshu's beautiful eyes flowed with longing. Confident of victory, Madame Hong is absolutely right. How could the courtesans in the brothel compare to my looks, family background, figure, and talents? Even in bed, who could match me? I will make the crown prince never seek out those prostitutes again, and keep his heart firmly with me alone. The first day of the 4th lunar month. Peach blossoms blazing, truly a fine season. After a month of Madame Hong's coaching, Yunshu had changed greatly. Every day she rubbed peach blossom scented balm on her body, a faint, alluring fragrance lingering about her. She also took the remedies prescribed by the Red Sleeve House, leaving her skin tender and white as snow, without a single down. Her cheeks blushed like peach blossoms and her skin was like congealed cream, a willow-like slim waist. When she walked she swayed and coquette, exuding an irresistible charm. In the morning, Yunshu shaped her brows, tinted her lips, and dusted on perfume powder. Everything about her met the standards of a bride, except she did not wear a phoenix coronet and embroidered robe. Yunshu held my hand gently and said, "Ning, thank you for helping me cover things these days. In other families, the bride is sent off with bridesmaids, but my situation is special, and my parents can't be mentioned. I hope you can come to Hongxiu Building to accompany me for my wedding." "Okay." I returned her hand and spoke sincerely. Of course, being able to accompany sister as she goes to marriage is my good fortune. Yunshu gave a gentle smile and said, "I also have a gift for you." I daren't accept such a deadly gift. I saved Mo Hua's mother. In return, Mo Hua secretly took me to the maid's ear room, where I overheard Yunshu and the madam's scheme. Yunshu's voice was vicious. "Yun Ning knows too many of my secrets. She can't be allowed to live." Madame Hong rubbed her hands. "Miss, don't worry. This old servant has already done as you asked and found 5 or 6 of the most sadistic customers. On the day of the red sleeve banquet, they were brought to second Miss's room and locked in together. All of them are violent and coarse men. After one night of that, TSK, second Miss won't have an inch of good flesh left. She'll be ruined." Yunshu nodded in satisfaction and gave detailed instructions. "Remember, no matter how Yun Ning screams for help, under no circumstances are you to let anyone out." Mo Hua fell to his knees with a thud. "The young miss actually has such a vicious heart." "Second Miss, you absolutely must not go to the Red Sleeve Pavilion." "No." I smiled. "Of course I'm going." Yunshu made her stage debut in full makeup and stood up on the platform. The play I wrote was about to begin. Such a good show. How could I miss it? The Red Sleeve Pavilion was a huge painted boat. The courtesans' soft voices drifted over the green waves, the pipa ringing, the strings and flutes trembling. Outside, red candles hung high, making the river glow brightly. Inside, there was not an empty seat. All were high officials and noble scions, surrounded by a throng. The man at the very center was Crown Prince Lu Ping. He now lounged casually, leaning against a redwood chair. Handsome features, tall stature, sword-like brows and starry eyes. His long fingers toyed with a jade pendant of pure emerald, exuding aristocratic air. A remarkably fine appearance. Otherwise Yunshu would not have secretly surrendered her heart, refusing to marry anyone but him. The Crown Prince's maternal clan held military power, and with the Empress having died young, the Emperor indulged the prince out of affection for the family. Only thus did he tolerate the prince's rakish excesses. Looking back now, the emperor's behavior seemed more like smothering praise. After all, it wasn't the crown prince who ascended the throne in the previous life. Yunshu's face was veiled in fine gauze, wearing a thin silk dress that barely covered her. Her smoky gaze and charming walk brought her to the crown prince's side, where she bent gracefully. "Your Highness, your subject greets you." The crown prince sat up straight with indifference. Madame Han laughed. "Miss Peony is receiving guests for the first time. She's still a maiden." Bidding calls rose and fell. The crown prince stared at Yunshu intently and, with one decisive hammer strike, said, 100 taels of gold. Sold. Madame Han laughed with her eyes nearly closed. "Miss Peony's first night belongs to you." Yunshu wore a gauzy, smoke-like feathered robe, a red veil covering her head. Sitting upright on the bed, beneath the red veil, Yunshu's cheeks flushed. Exquisitely beautiful. Her heart pounded, each beat a drum of joyful excitement. Years of longing, a dream fulfilled at last. Yunshu had long since forgotten what kinds of torments I might suffer outside the door. Just a wall away, under her orders. With a creak, the door was pushed open. "Oh ho, this little miss still wants to play coy with us, even keeping her veil on. But she's just a courtesan from a brothel. Does she really think she's some formally betrothed noblewoman? Ha ha ha. Strip her and she's like any other." Yunshu was jolted awake and tore off the red veil. The figures who entered were no princely noblemen, handsome beyond compare. They were clearly 5 or 6 squat, crude, lecherous clients with vulgar faces. Yunshu panicked. "Who are you? Why are you here? Where is His Highness the Crown Prince?" "Mother Hong. Mother Hong." The client laughed. "What else would you come to a brothel for? Of course to hire a prostitute. Mother Hong only said she was a respectable young woman. But I didn't expect her to be the famous Madame Peony making a scene today. Brothers, we've hit the jackpot." Several ugly middle-aged men rubbed their hands and chuckled. A nauseating stench came from them as they easily overpowered Yunshu's struggles. Yunshu screamed her heart out. "Someone, help, save me." No one came to save her. After all, this was precisely what Yunshu had explicitly instructed, no matter how much the person in the room screamed for help. Under no circumstances were they to be let out. On the first day of the 4th month in the previous life, the Grand Counselors impeached the Crown Prince, and he was urgently summoned back to the palace. If Yunshu had not intended to harm me, she would have merely sat alone through the night, waiting for her next encounter with the Crown Prince. Unfortunately, Yunshu was a bit more vicious than I had imagined. Yunshu was always harsh with her servants, quick to strike and scold. Like ink painting, I easily bought off many of the maids around Yunshu. They were unobtrusive, like little ants, each performing their duties. Yet a 1,000-mile embankment can collapse from an ant's tunnel. Even small maids could secretly switch things. Delivering the villain Yunshu had appointed into Yunshu's own room, a gust of wind came, and peach blossoms fluttered down. I picked up a petal and chewed it to pieces in my mouth. "Yunshu, are you satisfied with the play I wrote?" The clients Yunshu carefully selected really knew how to torment someone. She lay in the red sleeve house for a full 3 days before waking up. Lying in bed, her skin was covered with wounds, her muscles and bones out of alignment, blue and purple marks visible everywhere, her whole body exuding an air of decay. The first thing Yunshu did when she woke was demand to see me. Yunshu's eyes were filled with malice. "Yunning, was it you?" I said calmly. "Sister, words and actions require evidence. How could a respectable girl like me know those lecherous clients? How could I possibly arrange for them to enter your room?" I smiled faintly. "As for you, sister, you are deeply associated with the madam of the brothel and were even the top courtesan yourself. Tell me, who will people believe, me or you?" I could wipe away the beginning and the end and avoid exposing myself, but it would inevitably implicate the maidservants close to Yunshu. They were all barely grown girls. How could I stand by and watch Yunshu torment them? I had already given them enough silver to leave the capital. It was precisely because of that Yunshu could so quickly suspect me. Yunshu hated me with a burning hatred, wishing she could tear my flesh and suck my bones and blood to ease the fury in her heart. "Yuning, do you think this is the end?" she said sharply. The crown prince loves me deeply and has already sent for me to enter the Eastern Palace. Once I become the crown princess, it will be your death day. Then I will repay you 100-fold, 1,000-fold for the suffering you've caused me. I will make you unable to live and unable to die. Yunshu had never imagined that the torments she suffered all stemmed from her own choices. Despite being born into the best background, she had deliberately taken one wrong step after another. It seemed, in fact, that she and the crown prince were the same kind of person. They had had lives that were too smooth, possessing everything from birth. Her father doted on Yunshu and treated her wrongdoings lightly. The emperor indulged the crown prince, letting him do as he pleased. They treated every step in life as if it were as effortless and carefree as birth itself. So they indulged their desires, squandered freely, and never considered the consequences. I said loudly, "Sister, don't forget, you are no longer the eldest miss of the Yun family, but the brothel courtesan peony. Has the crown prince lost his mind? Would he make a brothel courtesan his crown princess?" A few days later, I received what I had wanted, a letter sent by Mo Hua. I was reborn, and of course I didn't want to die, so it was my turn to strike back. A table, a game of chess, sandalwood smoke curled in the air. Across the board sat a young man, aquiline nose and thin lips, eyes like ink dots, a smile at the corner of his mouth, full of spirit. CFA by young Lord Xia. CFA Bai held a chess piece in his clearly jointed fingers and said leisurely, "I'm a prodigal son. What could I have done to make Miss Yun II pay a visit?" CFA Bai's father was the Marquis of Shenping, and his mother was the Princess of the Front. He loved fun and drink, rode horses through the streets, teased cats and dogs, played polo and kuju. There was nothing he wouldn't play. So in the previous life no one expected that the person closest to the throne would not be the crown prince, but this carefree little marquis. On the night before the old emperor died, CFA Bai wore iron armor, held a long sword, and surrounded the imperial bedchamber with the forbidden guards. In the emperor's final moments, it was CFA Bai who stayed by his side. No one could have stopped CFA Bai from directly ascending the throne. Yet for reasons unknown, at the moment of seizing the city he abandoned the throne and left without looking back. A country cannot be without a ruler even for a day. The third prince was bright and, with my father-in-law's help, eventually became emperor. Even after being reborn, I still do not know why CFA Bai would give up a throne within his grasp. But that did not prevent me from persuading him to form an alliance with me. I placed a letter on the chessboard. "Little Marquis, why not first see my sincerity?" CFA Bai unfolded the letter, his sword-like brows lifting slightly. The second miss hides her talents well. She even managed to obtain the Eastern Palace's secrets. I replied unhurriedly, "I have something I seek, and the young Marquis has something he seeks. Wouldn't the young Marquis want to use force against force and achieve twice the result with half the effort?" CFA Bai's eyes narrowed. I did not look at him. My gaze fell on the chessboard. This time, I took the black pieces and moved first. Yunshu's body was restored, and she was sent into the Eastern Palace in a small sedan chair. After careful training by Hong Mama, Yunshu's every gesture and movement conformed to the Crown Prince's preferences. Before long, the whole capital knew that the Crown Prince had taken to the Red Sleeve House's top courtesan, Peony, who did not leave for a full 7 days. People talked in whispers. What kind of charm does this Peony lady have? It's enough to make the prince's soul fly away. No one could have imagined that the famous and top-ranked courtesan in the capital was the eldest Miss Yun of the Yun family. Even her father was deceived. Yunshu sent a message, saying she would go to Xiangshan Temple to pray for the common people, playing the role to the fullest. Yunshu stays at Xiangshan Temple every year for a month, and her father still has no suspicions. That day, I had a secret meeting with Mo Hua at Drunken Fairy Pavilion. Only Mo Hua remained among the maids. She said, "Second miss saved my life, and I want to repay her." Mo Hua brought news from the East Palace. Yunshu brags to the Crown Prince every day, scheming to harm second miss. "You must be careful." Before the words finished, a poisonous dagger hissed toward my brow. At the last moment, a long sword flashed out diagonally, knocking the poisoned arrow aside. 4 or 5 assassins in black cloaks jumped down from the beams. drawing their blades. I, without thinking, shielded the ink painting behind me. The assassin's blades whistled through the air. Faster than their movements was Siafei's sword. The long sword moved like flowing clouds in water, piercing the assassin's hearts. Siafei used his sword to lift apart the dead body's clothes, and upon seeing the tattoos on their chests, he clicked his tongue in wonder. Yun heir, you really know how to cause trouble. You've even alarmed the royal palace's dead soldiers. Plotting with you. I'm afraid I've boarded your thief ship. I gave a fake smile. Young lord, your martial arts are superb. Such trivial tricks surely won't harm you. Seeing me shield the ink painting behind me, Siafei curiously asked, you, a pampered young lady, actually protecting a maid? I confirmed that Mo Hua was safe, and only then breathed a sigh of relief. Mo Hua is in trouble because I entered the game. I must protect her well, Siafei said, but people say that the young lady is noble, and the maidservant is lowly. I shook my head. If people say so, is it right? A wealthy heiress or a maidservant? It's just about birth. Yunshu's birth is that of a noble daughter, and she chose to enter the brothel. Lu Ping's birth is that of a crown prince, and he chose to indulge his desires. Birth is only the starting point, but the end point, how it turns out, needs to be walked step by step on one's own. Siafei was slightly startled, raised his eyebrows, and smiled. Your argument is quite interesting. I look at him and get to the point. Yunshu has already informed the crown prince that she is the eldest daughter of the Yun family. The words I had spoken to Yunshu that day began to take effect. So she told the crown prince that she is Yunshu. She thinks this shows her devoted feelings. In reality, she has handed over a weapon to the crown prince herself. Father and the crown prince have always clashed, and the daughter of the prime minister of Yun, even if she drags herself down to be a courtesan, will still stay by the crown prince's side. Such a story could become a blade. When father and the crown prince finally throw down, they will strike at each other from all sides. I smile faintly. This game, we can take the next step, Siafei calmly says. Peony and the Phoenix have already prepared, waiting at any moment. 3 days later, the crown prince took Yunshu to the theater to watch a performance. The crown prince was in high spirits, and Yunshu picked up the pipa and sang a Jiangnan lullaby for him, under the watchful eyes of all. As Yunshu's mellifluous song drifted, the peonies began to bloom slowly, and distant phoenixes accompanied the sound, as if phoenixes chirping. The crowd was astonished and trooped to their knees in a clatter. Your Highness, the peonies are in full bloom. The phoenixes are singing. This is a great omen. This wife of yours is born under the phoenix's fate. If the crown prince's wife is fated to be a phoenix, then what is the crown prince? He is the true dragon emperor. The crown prince was overjoyed and rewarded the opera troupe handsomely. He then took Yunshu with him and they returned home in high spirits. Meanwhile, everything began to go smoothly for the crown prince. His policy proposals were highly praised. His poems and songs were widely circulated in the capital, and he even won 10 consecutive rounds of dice games at the gambling den, betting on both the banker and the player. It was as if he had truly been blessed by a lucky star ever since Yunshu came to his side. The crown prince's affection for Yunshu grew ever stronger. Yunshu, no longer suppressing her wicked intentions, began using the crown prince to eliminate those who had offended her. The clients who had once humiliated her were brutally murdered in the streets. Any maids in the Eastern Palace with even a modicum of beauty were flogged and whipped. Yunshu would find any pretext to order their faces disfigured and their expulsion from the palace. Those prostitutes whom the crown prince had chosen met even worse ends. The two were deeply in love. Their relationship as sweet as honey. At the Xie residence, in front of the Nanmu 8 Immortals table, Siafei and I sat on opposite sides of the board. I still had the black stones. Siafei sighed. Yuning, with this move you encircle the white stones, thinking your momentum overwhelms the black. But in fact the white stones are already being driven into a dead end. I said calmly, if the white stones realize this is a trap to lure them, there's still a chance to turn the game. What if they don't see through it? I placed a black stone and smiled. Then they'd better resign early. Siafei and I exchanged a smile. The overture finished, and this play was finally nearing its climax. The crown prince and Yunshu behaved with increasing recklessness. Yunshu said, "The ancients hid beauties in golden houses. He's a beauty. And the crown prince is heir apparent, he shouldn't be any worse than the ancients." The crown prince went so far as to use disaster relief silver and had a pavilion built of gold for Yunshu, spending his days indulging in pleasure with him. Yunshu said, "Madam Hong has an ancient method. Bathing with human milk will make the skin tender and smooth, snow white and flawless." The crown prince summoned hundreds of recently delivered women. Disregarding their wailing infants, he ordered them to give their milk for Yunshu's baths. The crown prince had a secondary consort, the daughter of the chief instructor of the Imperial Academy, upright in character and never favored by the prince. The consort admonished him that as heir apparent he must not act tyrannically or harm the people and waste the state's resources. Not long after, this consort fell ill and died. Not only that, Yunshu also planned to kill an old acquaintance, young Marquis. Second Miss Madam Hong has brought them. Madam Hong wore rags, her face bruised and swollen, her body covered in burn marks. She burst in crying, snot and tears pouring down. "Second Miss, save me." To eliminate any threat, Yunshu could kill me. And she certainly wouldn't spare Madam Hong either. The other day Yunshu set Red Sleeve Pavilion on fire. I had long expected she would do that, so I had sent people ahead to stand guard and pulled Madam Hong out of the blaze. Madam Hong wailed, "Yunshu has such a vicious heart. I only wanted to help her scheme, and she tried to burn me to death." I was neither pleased nor angry. "Oh, those clients who sought to violate me, were they also schemes you hatched for her?" Madam Hong was at a loss for words. CFA Bai suddenly flew into a rage. His long sword left its sheath. The blade flashed and sliced off one of Madam Hong's hands. "Ah!" Madam Hong screamed in pain, blood gushing out as she kept kowtowing. "Mercy! Your Honor! It was Yunshu. Yunshu told me to do this." CFA Bai was seething with fury. The long sword lodged at her throat, wanting to kill her with one stroke. I held CFA Bai's hand back. "Keep her, she can still be useful." CFA Bai's face went icy cold. A heart of venom and poison, death would be no pity. I smiled and said, "So I dragged you onto the pirate ship. With you here, no one can hurt me anymore." CFA Bai froze, his ears slowly reddening. I watched with some curiosity for a moment. This hell-raising devil actually had a thin skin. It wasn't until CFA Bai covered his ears to keep me from looking that I pressed my lips into a small smile. "How do you think His Majesty will deal with the Crown Prince?" CFA Bai still covered his ears. "If the capital won't tolerate it, then exile him." A major corruption case broke out in Jinhai, sending the Crown Prince there is most appropriate. I smiled faintly and turned to Madam Hong. "I'll give you a chance to make amends. Go to Jinhai with Yunshu and tell her you are utterly devoted to her and willing to obey her every command." CFA Bai's judgment proved correct. This string of events stirred the court and the country. Although the Crown Prince had been mediocre and indulgent before, his excesses had been limited to revelry and debauchery, never this outrageous. The father of the Crown Prince's deceased concubine was the most agitated. "My daughter died under suspicious circumstances. The Crown Prince extorted and oppressed the people and acted arrogantly and tyrannically. How could he serve as heir?" Impeachment memorials piled up on the emperor's desk like snowflakes. They accused the Crown Prince of extravagance and of killing civilians. The emperor appointed the Crown Prince as imperial commissioner, sending him off to Jinhai. He was not to return to the capital until the case was solved. Yunshu cried and fussed to go to Jinhai with the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince, fond of a beauty's warmth, secretly slipped Yunshu onto the carriage. Madam Hong wept and wailed that she had no other intentions. With the red sleeve courtesan house gone, she only wished to follow Yunshu wholeheartedly to Jinhai. Jinhai lies close to the capital and is also a prosperous region. When the Crown Prince arrived at Jinhai Prefecture, he set the investigation aside and first went to the brothel. The top courtesans of Jinhai were extraordinarily beautiful. The Crown Prince lingered long and even brought the leading courtesan back to his residence, where guards were posted to watch over her. Yunshu has recently been showered with affection. How could she endure such humiliation? She quarreled with the Crown Prince several times. The Crown Prince only placated her. He spent increasingly long hours in the courtesan's chambers. Yun Shu was furious. Madame Hong said, "Miss, don't be anxious. This old servant has a plan." She whispered it into Yun Shu's ear. The next day, Madame Hong carried a plate of pastries to the courtesan's door and told the guard, "These are from His Highness for the lady." She was a favored concubine of the crown prince and invoked his supposed orders, so she passed through without hindrance. No one suspected that Yun Shu had poisoned the pastries. The courtesan, unaware, ate the pastries and died on the spot. In Yun Shu's mind, she was nothing more than a brothel courtesan. Killing her was no different from killing a stray cat or dog. This time, however, he had made a grave mistake. The crown prince was truly ready to get to work. He had taken the courtesan into his residence because she was a key witness in the corruption case. The ledgers, documents, the officials' connections, and the hidden ill-gotten silver, only she knew where they were buried. If she died, all the leads would be lost. Word had it the crown prince, believing he had both witness and evidence, arrived at the courtesan's door in grand procession with the court-appointed investigators and the officials of Jinhai. The crown prince was calm and composed. "I anticipated you would try to kill the courtesan and have long since stationed guards so thick you cannot pierce them. This case is still under my control." The door was opened, and inside lay the courtesan's corpse, poisoned to death. That day, everyone present saw the crown prince's face change as quickly as a Sichuan opera mask. The expression was so remarkable it defied description. The crown prince flew into a rage, seeing that the evidence of corruption he had obtained had all been cleanly taken by Yun Shu, and that he had been utterly humiliated before the high ministers of the court. He was furious. Yun Shu wept with tear-streaked cheeks. "Your Highness, I resorted to this stratagem because I love you." This time, what she received was not the prince's soft words of comfort, but a slap, heavy, struck across her face. Yun Shu was young and beautiful, her body firm, and being a pampered noble daughter. The prince was curious for a while and rather doted on her. Yun Shu, however, mistook this for love. The prince's favor toward her was no different from his affection for those courtesans before, nowhere near his craving for power. The courtesan queen was dead, and the prince slunk back to the capital, having accomplished nothing. The prince's debauchery and incompetence had never won the people's hearts, and the court officials were deeply dissatisfied with him. Now that he had been caught with incriminating evidence, led by his father and joined by half the ministers, they stood up and demanded the prince be deposed. At the court assembly, father stepped forward. "The crown prince is incapable and unfit for the great responsibility. I earnestly beg your majesty to discern this. The crown prince favors a courtesan from the pleasure house, bringing great calamity. The heir is the nation's future. I dare request your majesty to establish another worthy successor." The crown prince laughed out loud. "A courtesan from the pleasure house? Minister Yun, perhaps you still don't know, she is not a courtesan at all. She is plainly your eldest daughter." Yun Shu, father flew into a rage. "Don't slander with your words. Shu'er has always been kind at heart. Recently she has been staying at Xiangshan Temple as a commoner, eating vegetarian meals and praying for blessings. She writes me every day to report that she is safe. How could she be a courtesan?" The crown prince sneered. "All right then. Why don't you come to the Eastern Palace and see for yourself whether the top courtesan in my red-sleeved tower is really Minister Yun's good daughter." A group of people marched grandly into the Eastern Palace. Pushing open the bedchamber door, Yun Shu flung herself into the crown prince's arms like a fledgling returning to the nest. "Your Highness, Shu knows she was wrong. Please don't abandon Shu. Please." She looked up and saw the group of officials in court robes standing behind the crown prince. The middle-aged man at their head was particularly familiar. Her father's face flushed bright red as he trembled and pointed at Yun Shu. You. After speaking for a long while, his chest heaved violently, and then with a thud he fainted. The whole capital was in an uproar. The public gossiped voraciously, debating. "Have you heard? The eldest miss of the Yun family is that peony girl from the red sleeve house. Isn't that something?" What on earth was Yun Shu thinking? A well-bred young lady refusing her status, insisting on becoming the top courtesan of a brothel. "I heard she was the one who ruined the Jinhai major case too," What a disgrace. If she were my daughter, I would have strangled her long ago. What a disgrace. The father never expected that after a lifetime in office, reaching middle age, he would suffer such a humiliating insult. His old face was covered with shame. He severed ties with Yin Shu and kept to his house, refusing to go out. The sharp blade that Yin Shu had handed him ultimately found its way into his father's chest at the moment the prince's plot was exposed. Only then did he remember he had a second daughter. What about me? The maidservants looked at one another. Second miss hasn't been living at home for over a month. The guards at the Yun residence are like a sieve. If I were still living at the Yun estate, by the time my father remembered me my corpse would be rotting. CFA by half coaxed, half dragged me to the Xie residence as a guest. News of the Crown Prince's deposition arrived quickly. The notoriety he had accumulated in court over the years left him not even a rope to cling to in his final struggles. He vented all his grievances on Yin Shu, locking her in a room to torment her day after day, and even executed Hong Mama, who had betrayed her own. Yin Shu couldn't stand that the man she was hopelessly in love with turned out to be like that. For a moment she couldn't think straight and tried to drown herself in the lake, but was rescued by a guard. After that, she developed a high fever. Yin Shu had a high fever for 3 whole days. When she recovered, she no longer made a fuss, stopped insisting on seeing the Crown Prince, and didn't return to the Yun family. It was as if the fever had muddled her mind. She stayed in her room all day, muttering things that no one could understand. When this news reached the Xie residence, CFA Bai and I were playing a game of Go. CFA Bai's long fingers pinched a piece. He raised an eyebrow and smiled. Yun Ning, you have to win this game. I frowned, my gaze falling to the corner of the board. There's still a sliver of life here. I seemed to have won this game hands down. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd overlooked something. What was it? From what I know of Yun Shu, she's pampered and audacious. She never gives up until she gets what she wants. Yun Shu's temperament is extreme. In the last life she could have me executed by slow slicing with her own hands. And in this life she could debase herself to play the part of a courtesan. What on earth happened to make Yun Shu lose her composure like this? CFA Bai glanced at my face. Yuning, why do you look so grim? I grabbed his sleeve. Deploy the Imperial Guards and keep constant watch on movements in the Forbidden City. CFA Bai didn't ask any questions and simply replied, understood. I hesitated for a moment, then said slowly, one more thing. Help me leak a piece of news outside, say that the third prince is going to be married. CFA Bai looked puzzled. What does that have to do with the third prince? In this game of chess, there's me, there's him, there's Yun Shu, and there's the Crown Prince. The third prince, however, appears for the first time. I said slowly, I have a hypothesis, which will be verified within 10 days. In the script, there is always a climactic twist before the ending. Before long, news came from the Eastern Palace. The Crown Prince was dead. He had been killed by Yun Shu. Yun Shu put the Crown Prince's head into a wooden box, then acted as if nothing had happened and, while no one noticed, entered the third prince's residence. The stone in my heart fell to the ground with a thud. As expected, the power of spirits is always unfathomable. I can live a second life, and so can Yun Shu and the third prince. In the previous life, Yun Shu reigned as empress for who knows how long after I died. As a girl, Yun Shu was infatuated with the crown prince. Having just become empress, she longed for the man in her heart. But after she had sat on the throne for 10, 20 years, after she had tasted the sweetness of power, would Yin Shu still indulge in frivolous romantic feelings? So when Yin Shu heard the news that the third prince is getting married, she cut off the crown prince's head as a token of allegiance, intending to steer this life back on course and remain his empress. Report. The armor clanked as the Imperial Guards hurried in. They clasped their fists and knelt. Word from the palace. Third prince and Yin Shu assassinated fifth prince and sixth prince. Stormed into the palace last night, and are forcing a coup. Third prince had been reborn long before Yin Shu. He had secretly trained a private army, hidden in the nearby suburbs ready to be summoned. In the previous life the emperor died 3 years later, seeing a course completely different from before. Third prince and Yin Shu would suspect that I had been reborn as well. In war, Speed is paramount. Delay invites disaster. An invisible pressure hung over the vermilion walls and glazed tiles. The desire to seize power pulsed through the air. They had plotted everything, except for underestimating CFA Bai. The young Lord Xie seemed worldly and indifferent, but in truth he had the Imperial Guards firmly under his control. The palace was burning to the horizon. CFA Bai rode hard and gained the upper hand. He shouted loudly, "Traitor and rebel! Surrender at once!" The third prince sneered, pressing his long sword to the emperor's throat and forcing him out of the palace. "Who says I have been defeated?" Before the Qianqing palace, I saw Yunshu. Candlelight illuminated her blood-stained face. It was not the expression of a young maiden, but of the mother of the realm sitting in the highest place. She lifted the crown prince's severed head and declared in a clear voice, "The crown prince is dead. The second prince died young. The ninth prince is still a child. The fifth and sixth princes were executed tonight, roots and all. Right now, the imperial bloodline rests with only the third prince. The throne will, in the end, be passed to the third prince. It's only a matter of sooner or later." A stern voice rang out. "Who told you that I have only the third prince as my son?" The emperor, clad in dragon robes, had long occupied the throne and carried an air of unchallengeable authority. A long sword hung at his neck, lending him a composed gravity. CFA Bai is also a prince. The palace's secret decree silenced them. In an instant even the sparks of anger were quieted. CFA Bai was clearly the son of Marquis Xie and the princess. So how could he be an imperial prince? Could it be? The emperor forced a smile. "Fei Bei, you are the child of Yao and me." Princess Mu Yao had been adopted as a foster daughter because she once saved the late emperor. She grew up with the emperor as childhood companions. The empress, the crown prince's mother, came from a powerful family and would never allow anyone to give birth to a child before her. So the princess, pregnant, married Marquis Xie and gave birth to CFA Bai. I suddenly understood. That was why in the previous life CFA Bai had burst into the palace at the moment before the emperor's death and then given up the throne that was within his grasp. His commoner origins trapped his entire life in a transparent box. His lifelong struggle and torment were not for the throne, but to demand an explanation from his biological father. "Why did you abandon your pregnant mother? Why did you abandon me?" The emperor said in a low voice. "I have failed Yaoer and I have failed you." Seeing that all was lost, the third prince held his sword to the emperor's neck, his eyes bloodshot. CFA Bai's surname is Xie. He is the son of Marquis Xie. Right and wrong are determined by the victors. The dead cannot speak. Blood trickled down the emperor's neck. Even faster than the third prince was CFA Bai. With a whoosh, CFA Bai hurled his long sword, striking the third prince squarely in the chest, piercing his heart with a single arrow. The army collapsed like a house of cards. CFA swiftly and decisively wiped out the rebel forces. Yunshu was brought before me, bound hand and foot. She stared intently at me, her eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions: hatred, madness, bewilderment, and regret. This was not the young Yunshu, but the Empress Yunshu from her previous life. Her voice was hoarse and unpleasant. "Yunning, why didn't you stop me in this life? You clearly stopped me in the last life. My reputation is ruined. You are the sister of a prostitute. You will also be gossiped about behind your back, ridiculed and mocked, and you will never have a peaceful life. No man from a good family will be willing to marry you. You can only rot in the mud like me." CFA Bai put his arm around my shoulder and said nonchalantly, "You don't need to scare her. Yun Ningning is my wife. Anyone who dares to talk nonsense in front of her, I'll kill them on sight." Yunshu shrieked, "You're going to marry her? Aren't you afraid of the world's ridicule?" CFA Bai laughed loudly. "I'm a bastard. Why would I care about my reputation? Let the public say whatever they want. So what if I have a ridiculous background? A person has to make their own choices in life." I looked at Yunshu and asked, "Do you still remember the last thing you said to me in our previous life?" I took CFA Bai's longsword and plunged it into Yunshu's heart. In Yunshu's eyes, contorted with agony, I uttered the last words I heard in my past life. "Cloudy comfort. This is your retribution." 4 months later, CFA Bai and I held a grand wedding. The 10-mile red makeup stretched across the streets, and we vowed eternal harmony. 3 years later, the emperor fell gravely ill and before dying, entrusted the throne to CFA Bai. Day by day slid by. Spring turned to winter, and winter turned to summer. Lotus bloomed and withered. Crabapple trees shed and grew again. Many years later, I had a son and a daughter. Emma Hua became a wealthy businesswoman. The little girl from back then is now rich and powerful. And Yin Shu, who was born noble and refined, has seen the grass on her grave withers countless times already. CFA Bai, after the early morning court session, was admonished by a few old ministers who threw the policy documents into my hands. Whining, we agreed that the two saints would preside over the court. Yin Ningning, you are not to enjoy leisure here on your own. He buried his face in my bosom, muttering, I originally wanted to be a leisurely marquis. Who knew our Yin Ningning would cause so much trouble? The crown prince, the third prince, the Yun family's eldest and youngest ladies, all offended to the core. For the sake of the empress, I can only turn the salted fish over and strive forward. He glanced at me sideways. Did you come to find me because you couldn't stand to see me living carefree all day, and pulled me onto your pirate ship? Yes. I grasped his wrist, smiling. Since you've boarded my pirate ship, don't think about getting off so easily. Another April spring came. Warm breeze brushed by. Peach blossoms fluttered and drifted, landing on the palms where CFA Bai and I held hands. Then, the seas calmed and the lands grew tranquil. A glorious age of peace.